Oh,
Instead, Cantona would once again lose his mind and completely overshadow.
I'm sorry, that goal right there is absolutely ridiculous. So guys, welcome to the Planet Sport YouTube channel. If you don't know me, my name's Ben and I am a massive football fan. I probably got into football around 2007, 2008, so anything before that period, I'm not really all too familiar with. What we're going to be doing in this series is reacting to a series of iconic footballers in years gone by that I'm not really all too clued up on. And we picked a pretty big one for the first episode. In today's video we are going to be reacting to Eric Cantona. I think really there's only a couple things that I know about Eric Cantona at the moment. Obviously I know that he was United's number 7 and that was obviously quite an iconic thing. I know the Kung Fu kick and I know that chip he scored and the celebration after, but apart from that I'm not really all too clued up on him. So if you do going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and leave any suggestions in the comments down below of any other iconic classic footballers in years gone by that you'd like to see me reacting to. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. So let's jump into this one. Just how good was Eric Cantona? Let's find out.
After the Second World War, a man who fled from Spain after suffering liver damage in his fight against dictator General Franco would leave to France and eventually have a daughter who would meet the son of an Italian immigrant who lived in a cave that had been used as a Nazi outlook post near Marseille. These two would come together in the unlikeliest and most interesting way, which was truly fitting to the life their second son would live, and that little boy would be named Eric Cantona.
He does have the look of an iconic footballer, to be fair, doesn't he? That sort of monobrow serves him quite well, to be fair.
Despite living in a countryside cave house, he would have a passion for football and would soon begin playing for a local club, S.O. Kelole. Encouraged to play as a goalkeeper by his father, he would eventually move forward as his talent could not be overlooked. So much so that he would eventually get scouted by Auxerre and start playing for the youth team. Something that...
I mean, it's interesting that he started out his career as a goalkeeper, or at least his dad told him to be so, because I'm pretty sure he's fairly tall, isn't he? But for a big guy, obviously, did alright for himself. He's fairly skillful, isn't he? So, yeah, fairly interesting that.
Wouldn't last long as he would be moved up to the first team. After playing 7 matches in his first 2 seasons for Auxerre, his career would be put on hold so that he could take part in his mandatory military service. As he came back, he would be loaned out to the 2nd Division team, FC Martigues. Finally taking a major role for Auxerre in 1986, he would get his first opportunity to play for the French national team despite being only 20 years old at the time. That would not last long either, as he would
he is fairly big, isn't he? But he carries the ball so well.
And punch him, leaving Bruno with a black
I mean, that is
eye,
outrageous.
getting himself banned from the national team. The next year, he would get into trouble again, being suspended for 2 months after a dangerous tackle on Michel Derzakarian. In the summer, he would take part in the under-23 Euros, scoring 3 goals, all of them coming against England in the semi-finals.
I mean, like I sort of mentioned at the beginning, one of the few things that I do know about Cantona is obviously that Kung Fu kick, so it's interesting to learn sort of a bit of the backstory behind that and sort of how sort of behaviour in his past had sort of built up to that moment and stuff like that. But I think that every sort of, you know, ridiculously good footballer has got that bit of an edge to them, and you know, Cantona obviously had that, didn't he?
That would make him enjoy a bit of notoriety for a while, that would grant him a place in Marseille for 3.3 million euros, a national record at the time. It would keep making himself look like a...
I mean, that's ridiculous if we consider what people are going for these days. I know inflation and stuff like that, but you look back on these sort of price tags, 3.3 million. I think he'd be worth a little bit more than that these days.
Cannon, kicking a ball into the crowd and ripping off his shirt after being substituted in his first season at Marseille. These problems would lead them to loan him to Bordeaux and then Montpellier, where he would famously throw his boots at a teammate's face. Regardless, teammates Valderrama and Laurent Blanc would convince the team not to suspend him, and his incredible form would lead Montpellier to win the French Cup and convince Marseille to take him back. His final season at Marseille would see the club change coaches a couple of times, even being coached by Beckenbauer for a while. Eventually, the final coach would have severe issues with Cantona's personality and sell him to Nîmes, despite his contribution to their league title. At Nîmes, his anger issues would hit all-time highs, with a player throwing the ball at a referee, getting a disciplinary hearing and getting suspended for 1 month, to which he would take the opportunity to call each of the members of the committee idiots to their faces, as they would go on to extend his suspension for an extra month. Cantona would be left even angrier and would announce that he was retiring from football at the age of 25. Witnessing his career go to waste, many would try to get him to come back. First, Platini would attempt to get Sheffield Wednesday and Liverpool to give him a trial, and eventually Gerard Houllier and his shrink would convince him to move to England and start over, which would prompt his move to Leeds United in the winter transfer market of 1992. As he arrived in Leeds, he found a team that...
I mean, that's crazy right there, the sort of journey that he's been on throughout his career in France, and then he was at that situation where he was ready to sort of give up football and things like that, and obviously what followed on from this, I'm guessing, isn't all too bad.
Despite having no big names, was somehow fighting for the title. Cantona must have empathized with the cause, as he would not only go the rest of the season without causing much trouble, but he would also be amazing on the pitch, being the last piece in the
the technique is ridiculous, isn't it?
The promoted side of Leeds United clinched the last English Football League title in the penultimate match of the season. The next season would start amazingly, as Leeds went on to play the Charity Shield with Liverpool despite missing several of their regular starters, and still win, as Cantona would become the first player since 1957 to score a hat-trick in the competition, and one of the few to score one at Wembley Stadium. Then, as the first season of the new Premier League started, Leeds would seem very solid still, beating Tottenham 5-0 as Cantona scored the newly created competition's first hat-trick. In the Champions League, they wouldn't last very long, going out in the second round of playoffs, after defeating Stuttgart in a very tough match where they would lose the first leg 3-0 and then go on to win the second leg 4-1, leading Stuttgart to go through on away goals. But this would not be the case in actuality, as UEFA would soon realize that Stuttgart had fielded 4 foreign players, which didn't fit the tournament's rules. Therefore, a 3-0 win would be given to Leeds. The problem was that this meant the match ended on a tie, so they would have a specially set up neutral match at the Camp Nou to decide who would go through, which Leeds United would win 2-1. Through all of this, Cantona suffered through his injury recovery and was unable to help Leeds as they slowly went down in the league table. Cantona was never one to deal well with tough times, and soon as a rift would be formed between him and the rest of the team, with him eventually being dropped and requesting a transfer during the winter market. With Sir Alex Ferguson in desperate need of a striker, trailing behind at only 8th place in the league, mainly to the lack of creativity in the attack, the player would move to Manchester United for just £1.2 million. It would debut for the club in a friendly match in Lisbon.
I mean, that right there is absolutely ridiculous. £1.2 million, and going from Leeds to United as well, which I imagine caused up a bit of a stir back in the day. We recently had the stuff with Ronaldo, didn't he? And when there was even the faintest idea that he might end up at Man City, I can only imagine what this transfer sort of meant at the time, going from Leeds to Man United with that rivalry.
To celebrate Eusebio's 50th birthday, and then he would breeze into the starting 11, completely turning the team's form around, creating chances left and right, with his only odd moment coming in his match against...
To be fair, United did have some pretty iconic kits back in the day, didn't they? I like a couple of them.
Former team Leeds, where he would spit in a fan's face. Regardless, by the end of the season, Manchester United were top of the table for the first time in 26 years.
The colours on the shirts as well, they look great.
The first foreign player to win consecutive Premier League titles with 2 different teams. The next season, he would completely settle down, winning PFA Player of the Year, finishing in 3rd place in the Ballon d'Or, only behind
just
Roberto
graceful.
Baggio and Dennis Bergkamp, revalidating the Premier League title and finishing as the team's top scorer in all competitions with 26 goals. The next season should be remembered for Man United's close title race with overachievers Blackburn Rovers, but instead Cantona would once again lose his mind and completely overshadow his performances on the pitch, as in a match against Crystal Palace he would kick a player out of frustration and be sent off.
I'm sorry, that goal right there is absolutely ridiculous.
As he walked
it's going to show a
towards the
replay
tunnel,
here.
a fan came down 11 rows of seats to yell at him, "Go back!"
I mean, people are on the floor trying to stop him, and then the cheek of that finish.
At him, kicking him in the chest like a kung fu fighter and then punching him several times. That moment would be front page of every newspaper, with people calling for him to be banned from football for life and even deported.
I mean, yeah, that's obviously one of the few things that I knew about Eric Cantona coming into this thing. Probably the most sort of infamous moment of his career right there. But it's interesting to see what the comeback after that was sort of like.
Eventually, it would be sentenced to 120 hours of community service, banned by the FA for 8 months and stripped of the captain armband by the French national team, after which he would never play for them again. In his first press conference after this, he would sit and say, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think fish will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much." And then leave the room, leaving everyone oblivious to what had just happened. Words that will never...
To be fair, another thing that I did see about Cantona was, I can't remember when it was, it might have been at one of the Ballon d'Or ceremonies or something like that, but he gave a speech then, didn't he? And yeah, it was fair to say his choice of words were interesting. Everyone sort of looked around like, what's sort of going on here? So that quote there doesn't really surprise me. He's a character.
Amongst all of this, of course, Cantona threatened to leave England, but Sir Alex would meet with him and convince him to stay. As he came back,
that's an outrageous goal.
After so many months not being able to play, and by the winter market, Manchester United were 10 points behind Newcastle. But then, Cantona and the whole team stepped up, going 10 matches unbeaten, with Cantona scoring in 6 consecutive matches. Manchester United would finally manage to secure the title in the last day of the season, as Cantona once again managed to be the top scorer despite his ban.
Loves the chip, love that.
He named captain of Manchester United, performing one of his most famous celebrations against Sunderland.
Yeah, I've seen that, obviously.
By the end of the season, they had won the league once again, and shockingly, Cantona would announce his retirement at the young age of 30. As he would explain himself by saying, "I want to retire while I'm at the top." Cantona is one of the most enigmatic figures the sport has seen. We all seem to have a love-hate relationship with him, because as entertaining as his antics might have been, it clearly cost him the opportunity to solidify his place amongst the greats. I even question myself whether or not he deserved a place in this series, to be honest.
I mean, it's interesting that, isn't it, that he decided to retire at the young age of 30. Obviously things are a little bit different these days with like sports science and stuff like that, and things that are available to players and things like that, but the age of 30 seems really young nowadays, doesn't it? But I mean, yeah, you got to respect it. He wanted to go out at the top, and yeah, he certainly did that, didn't he?
At first sight, a striker that only managed 187 career goals, around the same as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and never won any major international trophies, cannot be deserving of a place like this. But not only do we get the sense that he never was at the peak of his ability, but also that he did contribute far more to the team than just goals, and that was my reasoning for putting l'enfant terrible in this list. Getting into our ranking system, when it comes to his finishing, it's very hard to rate. He was very elegant, but not the most prolific at all, and although I do believe we should give style points,
I think that's a good point really to touch up on, because I mean, when you're looking back on footballers and stuff like that, to sort of compare the stats and numbers to people nowadays, it's tough to sort of make those comparisons without actually have been there and watched them sort of in the flesh and really have a feeling of how good they actually were. Because yeah, like if you just look at his numbers and compare him to, like, say, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who this video did to in terms of the numbers, then you'll end up being a bit misled if you don't actually look into the context of all of it.
Game, a true joy to watch, and he could not get any less than a 10 out of 10. Then his mentality. I think this is the toughest thing I've had to judge so far on this series. He was a complete loose cannon and seemed to always make the worst decisions, but he was also an imposing figure which seemed to push teams onto success. Regardless, I think his career was more negatively impacted by this than positively, so he can only get a 4 out of 10. Now his legacy. First, consistency. He always performed both in...
I mean, the mentality one's an interesting one to sort of, from what I've learnt from him there, to sort of compare him to a footballer of the modern generation that I listen a lot of and stuff like that. You know, maybe with the controversy in his career and stuff like that, and the flair that he play with, someone like a Suarez maybe, someone like an Ibra maybe as well, sort of like with that mentality and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that Cantona was definitely one of a kind, wasn't he?
France and England, but he lacked internationally, so he can only get a 7 out of 10. Secondly, flair. At the time, he was one of the most satisfying to watch, so
that's the
subtle
chip
and
I've
graceful
seen.
with volumes and
chip.
all sorts of spectacular strikes. He gets a 10 out of 10.
And that is one of the most iconic celebrations ever as well, isn't it?
A single international trophy, not even a UEFA Cup, no Ballon d'Or, but winning 7 titles in 9 years is something incredible, and it warrants him a 3 out of 10. In terms of longevity, only 14 seasons, only 5 at a top team, having retired at 30 years of age, he can only get a 3 out of 10. Finally, the icon factor. This is by far one of
that
the
retirement
most
surprised
iconic
me. I mean, yeah, he is by far and away one of the most iconic footballers ever, you know. In terms of, like, knowing the full story of it, I didn't know much of it before this, but, I mean, you'd always hear things, you know, that number 7 shirt at United will always go back to someone like Cantona as well, so, yeah, understandable. Very, very interesting stuff. But guys, there we have it. In order to pay tribute to the main man himself, I decided to put my Marseille top on for the outro of today's video, but I do feel significantly more knowledgeable now on Eric Cantona. Make sure to go ahead and check out the original video, and do leave any other suggestions of players that you'd like to see me reacting to in the comments down below. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.